Hi, sorry about that. Welcome all. I'm Kathryn Appleton, the Director of Marketing for San Francisco Opera. Today, I am thrilled to welcome you all for a conversation about this weekend's stream, La Traviata, with Nicole Cabell, Stephen Costello, and Shauna Lucy. And I'm thrilled to welcome Shauna, the Assistant Stage Director for La Traviata, who's going to moderate our today's conversation. Shauna is a theater and opera director based in New York City and a frequent collaborator with San Francisco Opera. Most notably, she directed our new production of Tosca in 2018. Welcome, Shauna, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kathryn. It's just a delight to be with you today, and especially these two fantastic artists who I love. So first I'll introduce Nicole Cabell, who is our soprano, who portrayed Violetta in the production that is streaming this weekend. Hi, Nicole. Great to see you. Fabulous. And now let's bring on Stephen Costello, the one and only, our tenor, who portrays Alfredo Germont in this weekend's Traviata. There he is. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, how are you?
Great. I am, of course, thrilled to be seeing both of you guys because I've been very blessed to work with each of you. So I wanted to ask, where are you guys calling in from today? Nicole, where are you?
So I am in Rochester, New York. I am an assistant professor of voice at the Eastman University now in my other life, right? So my two lives together, and that's in Rochester in upstate New York. So it's nice and snowy and about -1 degrees.
Right, I was going to say, stay warm. How about you, Stephen?
We're in North Bergen, New Jersey. My wife and I just moved here during COVID from New York City.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. It's a cold, I'm in New York City, so it's a cold day here. A little further south from you, Nicole. Anyway, I wanted to ask you guys, did you guys know each other before doing this particular production of Traviata?
You want to go, Stephen?
Well, it's a hard question, I think, because in this business, everybody sort of knows each other, but doesn't know each other. You know what I mean? So you know of each other. We all have mutual friends. I believe this is the first time Nicole and I had worked together. So, yeah, I guess it's the first time we ever collaborated together.
Yeah.
We might have had a concert gala or something prior to that, but I was trying to think of the answer to that question myself earlier, thinking was that the first time, because it certainly wasn't the last. But yeah,
no, we had one. I mean, well, what feels like recently, since we haven't been working in it here, but it's and but I can't remember anything before the Traviata.
I asked partially because you guys had such great chemistry on stage, the way y'all moved together and communicated. I myself wondered if you were like friends beforehand, if you had done Traviata before that particular experience.
We were married in a past life, you know, like maybe that's what, no, I don't know. I don't know, you know. I'll tell you what, I've known Nicole for a very long time as a performer. I mean, just I've seen her when I remember even doing that production. Nicole Cabell was one of the, you know, the big sopranos on the scene at that time. And so I knew of Nicole's performances, of course. So, and she's such a gracious performer, it just makes everything easier. So maybe that's why.
Completely likewise for Stephen. You know, I think this was our only performance together for Traviata. And I think there was, you know, there's always that wonderful excitement and terror at the same time in doing a show that for the first time, and sadly, our only one, because it was the end of my run, beginning of yours. But yeah, that was the first time we had worked together in that capacity. And, you know, Stephen's a dream to work with. So it was very, very easy. I think, you know, when you've been on the stage a lot, and you trust your partner, I think that kind of chemistry is easy.
Do you think that's particularly like necessary for Traviata, like more than other operas, would you say? Like being able, especially for like the soprano and tenor, to like trust each other? I mean, both musically and like spiritually. I don't know. What do you think, Nicole?
Yes, I would say not necessarily more than others, but I think it is very important to have that chemistry in Traviata. This is Violetta's only lifeline to joy. So you have to like your partner on stage. I suppose you can act your way through it, but it's always nice when you get that kind of chemistry. But you do have to trust each other, because there are some moments in this opera that are challenging from the point of view of sort of, I guess now you would call it a dangerous situation, right? I'm thinking of Act 2, where you have to trust each other when they're having this really humiliating and violent encounter, along with
Sure.
going to that extreme, but also going to "you're the only reason I live" and that kind of love. So you really do have to musically be on the same page, and you also have to trust that that whatever risks you want to take, that your partner on stage is willing to take that extremity of risk with you.
Totally. What about you, Stephen? Have you ever like had to do a Traviata where you just like got no rehearsal and stepped right in and had to go for it? Or have you always been able to rehearse it?
I'm sorry, I got clicked out. Can you, the internet
Oh,
froze for a minute.
sure. What, the internet giving us troubles? Pshaw. No, I was wondering if you've ever experienced that like wild, you step right into a production and you don't rehearse Traviata and you just got to go for it and hope that you and the soprano like musically and emotionally can work together.
100% happens all the time. Recently, I did it at the Met in a new production, and I stepped in at Christmas time with Diana Damaral. But you know, it's different from in Traviata in particular. You have to kind of go with the soprano's lead on this, because this is one of the few, and Nicole, maybe you can tell me if I'm lying or not, but this is one of the few operas where the soprano is on stage pretty much the entire time. So, which doesn't always happen. And as a tenor, Alfredo comes in spurts, and it's not as challenging of a role. There are spots that are difficult for the tenor, but it's not as challenging as it is for the soprano, and she's constantly on stage. So you kind of want to give the space and just make sure you're kind of letting her dictate what she needs, because I don't think there's really a time in Act 1 before Sempre Libre for you to go off stage and even get water or take a breath, or or fix a costume if something goes wrong. The only time you really get to do that is Act 2, and then you're constantly on for Act 3. So yeah, I kind of just go in and kind of just adapt. It's because the Alfredo will adapt to the mentality of the Violetta. It's a Violetta for the soprano is a big staple in their repertoire, and a lot of sopranos, I'm sure Nicole can tell you more on this, spend a lot of time perfecting Violetta and changing things and getting subtleties and nuances, especially because she's a courtesan and all of these other aspects of Violetta. Alfredo is pretty straightforward. He's very slightly immature, kind of goes with his heart on everything. And there's a lot of roles that are the same way. Violetta is a special character.
Right.
If you have a good tenor like Stephen, that does give you the space, right, to because you do have to pace yourself, and it's true, you can't sort of, much as you'd like to spend all the time in the world on certain notes, you have to pace yourself. So it's always wonderful when a tenor doesn't want to hold things out twice as long as you, or scream in your face when you're trying to bring the volume down. But indeed, I think you hit the nail on the head, Stephen, in that respect, that Violetta is, it's a beast. Some voices, I think, find it fits their voice quite easily. And I was always a Mozart singer and like bel canto. And so for me, Traviata represents kind of the extremity of my range as an artist. And you're right, it's an adventure rather than even perfecting it. You're always discovering new things about her and trying to figure out how to make it work even more authentically with your personality and your voice. And Alfredo is, he is a little bit more transparent. He doesn't go on the journey she goes on and in the depth that she does. So for a tenor, you have to be charismatic, you have to be supportive, and you have to have just enough. I mean, Stephen has the star power, right, to make it an important role, but it can sometimes get lost, under the weight of Violetta as the heroine of the opera.
As a dramatic character.
Exactly.
Totally. I always like to ask this because I feel like it's a secret. Is there any part, this for both of you, that you like really dread singing of either Alfredo or Violetta? Is there like one part of the opera that you're like, oh, just let me get through this one part and then good Lord, I'll be fine. And then what's your favorite part to sing? The part you're like, oh, this is my jam right here. Stephen, what about you? Do you have like a part you're like, no, I hate singing that part?
I've always personally had a love-hate relationship with La Traviata, because predominantly it's mostly it's lyric for the tenor, except for the cabaletta in Act 2, which is something out of like Trovatore. It doesn't really fit the lyrics of the line. And when I was younger, I used to just always, when I got up to it, I would just get a little tense. I was always nervous with it because it just comes out of nowhere, and it's slightly heavier than the rest of the role. And as I've gotten older, I've just learned to pinpoint what didn't work for me, and I fixed it since then. So I love it. And actually, what I love about Traviata is that you don't have to carry the night the entire time. You get to come on, you get to sing beautiful music. It's not too high and not too low. It just sits in there nice, and you don't have to carry it. You actually get a chance to hear some of these staple arias like Sempre Libera and Di Provenza with some of the greatest singers in the world. You know what I mean? So it's like as an Alfredo, you get your own personal concert every time you go on stage. But yeah, for me, I'd have to say that just the cabaletta. If I could talk to Verdi, maybe he could have slightly different.
Excellent. We'll put those thoughts into the ether for Verdi. What about you, Nicole?
They leave that in the cabaletta. By the way, I was informed that my microphone was low, so I've turned it up. And if there's any problem, somebody send me a message. But yeah, so I think choosing the example of the San Francisco Opera production, this was my second production of Traviata, so it was relatively new for me. So I think the things that are challenging for me now, having done it several more times and easy, were maybe different almost 7 years ago. My favorite part, we'll start there, is the whole of Act 3, but particularly after her aria, when Alfredo comes back and they have their moment together, because it's just this constant schizophrenia of feeling the most incredible relief and joy right after she knows that she's on death's door, and so she's conflicted with this, well, no, this is going to give me life now, and she keeps feeling the sickness as she's fighting against it. So it's a kind of intensity, but in her weakened state, that is really interesting to play with and express with colors. And you just know, if somebody hasn't seen the opera, and even if people have, what's coming, and it's so powerful just musically. And so you there's a little slice of your brain that's a bystander as you're singing, and you're thinking, oh, here it comes. 99% of the time, of course, you're like in the character, but it's in there. And there's a little like deliciousness from that. And at the very end, when you're dead, that's probably my favorite part. And I think the most challenging part for me is, depending on what cuts are taken, the Germont and Violetta scene, there's just a moment in it before she tells him that Alfredo's coming, he has to leave, that the vocal demands keep pressing, and it just repeats. There's of course, the repeating of it is what makes it that much more important. But sometimes as a vocalist, you're like, can't you just say it once? Can't you just hit those notes one time? So that's a little bit like, of a strain, because there's more, there's so much more coming. So yeah, that's probably the part that you're like, okay, this is what I trained for to get through. And I wouldn't say it's like my least favorite, but it's certainly the most challenging vocally.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. We've had a couple of questions come in from the audience, so I'm gonna toss them to y'all. The first one is for Stephen, with a thanks for doing this chat. Stephen, as a tenor who portrays Alfredo, can you speak to the relationship Alfredo has with his father?
It's tricky. It's funny. I had a wow. It brings up a PTSD that I had from another production. I had this whole conversation with the director before, and then after I went into my whole theory, I was just considered wrong, and I was like, "But why?" He's like, "Well, I just don't agree with you," and I'm like, "Well, but why did you ask me?" But anyway, besides all that, it's I feel like Alfredo is one of these guys that is still young, and his father pretty much dictated his entire life. Is how I feel, and that this is his first time really out on his own. He meets Violetta. It's just he's now going to start thinking for himself, and I feel like he always has that looming thing about his father over top of him. And how even though he feels free to be in this life with Violetta and feels like it's the right thing from himself, he still has the worry about his father over his shoulder and how his father is going to react, which is why he acts the way he does in Act 2. But I feel like he wants to break the mold. It's hard. Yeah. It's really hard to describe. That's a relationship that's always been hard for me, because it doesn't really go into it too much in this story. It talks about to Violetta, Germont talks to Violetta about what Alfredo has given up and what he has back at home waiting for him and his family. But you never hear that back and forth between Germont and Alfredo. And all you do in the scene with Alfredo and Germont is Germont's telling him that he has to, what he has to do, and not so much the backstory of him. So there really isn't a backstory set up between Germont and Alfredo. So it's always hard. And I just find that he's been coddled by his father, is what I think. And I feel like that he's always just had this frustration, and this is his opportunity to leave the nest and think on his own, because he finds this woman that he falls in love with that happens to be a courtesan. But his instincts are right, because she does love him and he does love her. And that's the hardest part of the story, is that he's this guy that's fighting an upward battle against everybody else that's trying to bring him down just based on the fact that she's a courtesan. So it's a really difficult relationship.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's one that you kind of endless digging is possible in a way,
Yeah, and there is endless digging, but the funny thing is in this opera in particular, you can do as much research on it as you want. Nothing's 100% clear, but there aren't a lot of moments to even set up the backstory. Because when Germont enters in Act 2 with Alfredo, he's kind of talking to him about Violetta, and Alfredo just gets this letter. So he's so enwrapped in the letter that he's barely understanding all of the things that Germont is saying to him, Yeah. So, and then the next time you see them together is Act 2 at the end, when Alfredo just had this big disaster at the party where he goes completely inappropriate and rogue on Violetta, and then his father scolds him, and then at the end, basically his father apologizes because he's sorry for that he didn't get to spend this last time with Violetta together. So it's even if you had that back information, there's not enough in the opera to make the connection between the two.
Totally. That's
sorry,
a hard leap.
Such a long answer. Sorry.
Well, it's a complicated question, right? It's a good one. Our next question from the audience is for Nicole. Did you adjust your vocal performance in any way to indicate the progression of Violetta's illness? And if so, how did you do that?
That's such a great question. And actually, that brings up a topic that is often discussed with Violetta, which is the three voices phenomenon. That Violetta is sometimes thought of as a coloratura soprano because of the first act, dramatic soprano, to a spinto, depending on how you sing it, through the second and part of the third. And the third voice you need, third act, you need kind of a completely different vocal color. And I don't think that's all necessary. I think that that's a great question because it's like truly, just using the full palette of your colors, making sure not to press either too much on your voice or take off too much. As long as you have the colors, you can portray the entire opera from beginning to end. So yes, with her illness, you hear it from time to time. I've done some productions of this where there are requests to get a sound in the first act of being exhausted from this. And of course, she's fighting it the whole time. I'm not sure, I don't remember if that was an approach I took with this one, but you want to see those little windows of exhaustion. She can't quite finish the phrase. And she almost is able to reach the power of fortissimo singing, or the sort of edge of the voice, vocal capability. A little bit in Act 1. In Act 2, the drama of the situation is so strong, and she's fighting in a way that is, I think, that calls upon the strength that she has left, and which she doesn't really have much in Act 3. But she has enough strength in Act 2 that the shreds of colors of sickness can come in there, but it's less on me as a singer. It's just less on my mind, because I feel like she has she's gathered up every bit of strength to attend this party, and she's giving the impression of health in a way that is even more dedicated than in the first act. If that makes sense. This is not fun. It's strength, complete and total strength in the so especially the party scene in Act 2, until talk more about the situation with Alfredo. In Act 3, this is the place that you can really let the real colors of such an intense illness really come through. And so there's really only like 2 spots in the entire act where she pushes past her strength barrier, and I think that leads her towards, it hastens her death, if that is a better way of, that's a way of putting it. But yes, just adding something as sort of obvious as, if you're breathless, you can't sing through that, but you're still phonating, and that's the color of weakness, and it's the color of breathlessness. And there are so many areas to put that in, or so many spots in Act 3 to incorporate that color. The way I think of it too is, I actually, anybody who's experienced enough physical pain, whatever that is in your life, we have the memory of that. And if you can embrace those memories of what it must feel like and just increase that, there is a tension in the voice naturally comes out. It's like with joy or with sadness, and that pain comes into the sound too. And you can really explore Violetta's color through that, and her sorrow and all of it. So yes, I mean, she's a character who has 1,000 colors in the palette. As an artist, we try as hard as we can to get all of those, and we're lucky if we get some of them to honor this character. But that's a long-winded way of saying yes, there is a journey, and that's mine, and it keeps evolving for sure.
Totally. And it definitely sounds like a marathon, like you're prepping for a serious marathon in the role of Violetta.
Yep.
So on a more like fun, nonsense note, since we're talking about Alfredo and, his relationship with his dad and rebelling against the expectations of his father, Were either of you like a rebellious teenager? Did you channel any of that in the role? Were any rebellion in your past?
I wasn't really rebellious. I just got in trouble. I didn't
For no reason, or were you culpable?
No, I didn't do bad things. I mean, like, okay, like I didn't do things to hurt people, or I didn't do things to that were just mean to people. But like when I was in high school, I got grounded a few times for drinking with friends. Okay, I'm just going to tell you this story. My mom's not watching. She's at work at the moment. So I remember I was in high school and I had a party at my house, actually with a couple of friends when my parents were out. And we drank a good number of bottles of their alcohol in their alcohol cabinet and then decided to fill them up with water. Well, I got grounded because I got caught. But then I got caught again because they were filled up with water later and they grounded me again, which I do think is double jeopardy because I was grounded for the crime and then grounded for the same crime several months later. But just things like that. I mean, nothing terrible.
Reasonable. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Nicole?
Good kid.
Do you have a rebellious past?
No, I was boring. I think I got a little spicier later in life. As you grow up following the rules, and I'm Gen X, right? And it's like I feel like we were just this sort of nebulous generation where it's like you followed the rules but you didn't rebel too much, but you rebelled just enough, and kind of boring in that way. But as I've gotten older, I think especially these last several, years in this country and just feeling the stressors that come on top of being a woman or in this business and stuff, you start to get impatient with everything and you start to rebel. I rebel more in this part of my life, this time of my life, than I ever did as a teenager. So, you're always trying to fight the system, and people talk at you about, things that you don't agree with, and you're constantly butting heads with people, and you're constantly trying to become autonomous in this world. And so whatever struggles that you need to go through to do that, you become brave. I have become braver and just more strong-willed to be able to do those things. So I suppose those sentiments are things that I've learned later. But boy, oh boy, I think I was a real scaredy cat when I was a teenager and really afraid of doing anything wrong. And in this career, you have to take a lot of chances. So right. I learned all those things after I, turned 20.
Yeah, I feel like when we were younger, we probably just got in trouble for the act. Like you just got in trouble for something that happened. Nowadays, kids get to talk about it and express why they did it, and there's a little more understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, I mean, it does make you kind of sympathetic for Alfredo going up against his father, right? Like if that wasn't, just knowing the fear that you had inside of yourself as a teenager to rebel against your parents, like, I mean, dating a courtesan, it's big, hot news, it's a big rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't even imagine if I was a kid and I said, hey, guess what? I went down to Sunset Boulevard and
this is my new partner.
Yeah, this is my new partner. Yeah, right. Your friends may have known her as well. I don't know. It's just, yeah. The magic of opera.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of which, we've got more questions coming in from the audience. So folks are wondering, a question for each of you. How do you think of approaching material that was made for a different time, balancing respect for the material with responsibility to evolving contemporary values, like, for example, the evolution of gender roles? Nicole, how has that affected how you think of Violetta?
That is such a topical subject right now because that is coming up everywhere. We're debating now what operas we should even put on. And I've been on a lot of panels this year on diversity and inclusion and gender equality. And this is something that is pretty much always brought up. What should we do with problematic material? Because that's what it is, right? I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I got into this business, you were 100% committed to exactly what it said on the page. And of course, your director, you did what the director said. but these days you have intimacy training and you have the conversations out as to whether or not you should even include original text. Sometimes when it's problematic, don't get me started on Monostatos and Zauberflöte, you know. But yeah, this is something that, you know, it's a per performance and per production topic of conversation and debate. Because you can work with a director that understands the gender dynamic of something like Carmen and how problematic it is, and then they change the gender role. I've seen it done where they change that she kills him at the end, and you think, okay, so how do you respect the original text? So we've thought about this on the panels, and some things that we've come up with is just, if we want to keep it purist, meaning that nothing changes, right? The intention of the librettist and the composer are what is being honored in the staging. Then you educate your audience as to what was going on in those times, why that happened, why these sentiments were expressed in the program. For instance, you start panel discussions about it. You have talks like this prior to an operatic performance, and you say, well, yes, we did it this way because it's problematic, because people should know that this is went on and it was not good. But there is a debate roiling around as to whether or not some things should even be featured. You know, we talk a lot about rape culture, and that is, if you put on operas, how many times is this a plot device in operas? And so should we even do those operas? Right. So yeah, so I don't have the answer, but all I can say is that it's in discussion, and we want to keep the art form alive. We want to keep true to what the composer and librettist asked for, of their artists, but we must make the audience aware that we know that these are problematic elements, whether or not we change them, talk about them, or just address them in some way, shape, or form. So,
what about you, Stephen? What do you think?
It's difficult, you know, because I have this theory that if we don't evaluate our history and we don't learn from it, we're only going to go forward and all that stuff is going to reoccur again. You know, we can't evolve if we don't learn from what we've done, right? So, and I feel like in the theater, at least when I was coming up in the theater, I was always told that the theater is a safe zone. It's a zone to express yourself. It's a zone to feel comfortable in bringing out different sides of characters and different things. And I feel like if we put things on stage, it's to eliminate things that were there and change it. We're not learning from it. We're just adapting to what's happening in today. And I think a theater is a place where we have to see it as a model, like almost like a diorama that you would make from school or something, you know, and encourage people to come to the theater to learn from it so they can visually see in the evolution of life, the things that we've done wrong, the things that are some of the events that are horrifying. I mean, I remember seeing, I can't remember the title of Houston, and it was about, in Houston did an new opera based on the Holocaust, and I thought it was incredible. And yes, it was difficult to watch, but I've learned so much more about that just from watching that thing. And I'm not talking about daily reminders, like daily reminders of racism and things like that that you see in monuments and statues and stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I feel like when you're going to the theater, you have to be able to learn from what's on stage. And in that respect, also, I do encourage people to start writing new pieces that identify with the evolution of life, you know what I mean? To where we are now, where we are as a society and where we want to become. Because the more and more that we just eliminate from things in that time, we have to understand why they did it. And it could be just because at that time period, people had extremely poor judgment. People didn't, it's hard to explain, but it's, you know, it's not how we live, and that's not how we want to live, but we have to learn from it. But we also, like I said, have to invent pieces that show the things we've gone through. I think, you know, past this COVID, we're going to be seeing a lot of new compositions that are going to be great about what happened during this and about racial inequality and how we changed the face of government based off of movements that happened during COVID. And I think those things are great. Those are the things that we need to champion as well. It's just so hard because you don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know what's going to happen when you see something. It's so difficult. Everyone is different. Everybody has a different story. Everybody comes from a different background. And, you don't want to offend someone. You don't want to hurt someone. But at the same time, you want others to realize, look, what happened in this story is wrong and you have to see it. We're not, and I don't think in opera, for instance, there's very few operas that have something like a rape scene that happens, and then there's no celebration for it, and there's no encouragement about it, and there's no saying, oh, great job, that's what you should do. We don't do that. It's always, even in the operas that I've done, it's very looked down upon by all the other characters. And usually the person that has caused that conflict usually ends up dying, to be quite honest with you. But it's very difficult. It's difficult because it's such a hard question. I hope it didn't sound too winded, but
no, it's it's a really complicated question of interpretation and responsibility for material, and the inheritance of what you might get a piece that has incredible music, but the plot is so problematic and how it was produced. So then what do? You just do you just throw the music away? That seems crazy when the music is so great. So yeah, this question of, interpretation is really important. And I think you both put it very, very well.
I'll tell you what will be interesting though, when you talk about gender roles and things like that, in the past, I don't know, Nicole, maybe you can tell me, in the past few years now, there's been a really big influx of countertenors into the business. And I would have no problem with someone as long, having a countertenor sing a soprano part. Of course, it's not my music, so it doesn't affect me. But still, like I said somewhere there's going to be an idea where Musette is played by a countertenor one day, and it could happen. They have the range, they have the notes. It could be a different take on it. It all could happen. I mean, I think people not only are adapting personally, but vocally are adapting to the current events that are going on as well.
And intention's a big one too. I mean, I'm glad that you've had that experience in opera where, those particular violent actions are met with, the director has, implied that that's punishable, because that's not always the case. And sometimes productions are mounted to be sensationalistic and to titillate the audience and to be, to sort of shock. And this is fine to a degree, but I think, again, with the particular issues that the light's shining on them nowadays, you have to be really careful about that kind of stuff, because you're gonna say, Stephen?
No, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I think it's the responsibility of the director to when it comes to those areas, really focus on it from a point, not just doing it because it's gross or because it's like something that I want to shock the audience. I want to put this in their face and do it. It shouldn't be do that. Those things should be really taken with like specialized. And I think it's up to the performers as well, when they're not getting that in rehearsal, where if they see something and they say, I'm sorry, that's just not right. You're glorifying this terrible scene, as opposed to showing people that this is what happened and this is what shouldn't happen. When you glorify something like that, I think it's also up to the people around them to be able to feel free without punishment to speak and say that has to change. And I think that's where we go wrong. You're right. There's a lot of people that just want to shock people. And
this is related to another question from the audience, talking about like times when you've needed to push back with a director or about something in a production that felt unreasonable or crossed a line for you, and what those conversations were like. If you felt like you've had success with that, or if it's been really tough to have those conversations. Because I do think, just in my years of being in opera, I feel like we're very slowly, but hopefully it will accelerate, able to have more like healthier conversations in the rehearsal room that are like respectful and make sure everyone is heard. But I'm wondering about y'all's perspective, Nicole, if you've had those kind of difficult conversations.
Yeah, such a great question, and I'm trying to remember if I've had anything that was that difficult in my past. I've been very lucky to work with directors who are collaborative. For the vast majority of directors I've worked with have been collaborative. I've seen quite a few negative encounters over the years between artists that don't like what the directors are telling them to do. And we talk about the age of the singer and then the age of the conductor, and we're sort of like, I think, going through this age of the director, which is fantastic because you're getting like really interesting productions and we're being, really challenged. But if the director is not collaborative, then they won't get the best performance out of the singer, and the singer won't feel safe.
Sure.
The last, I wouldn't say the last couple, but within 2019 when I was singing, I had two productions that we had an intimacy director on, and I don't know if you know what that is, but it's just, of course you do, Shauna, but I don't know if you've worked with an intimacy director, Stephen, or anybody, but it's interesting because it's another element in the room. We have to ask permission to be touched. We have to make sure that we are all comfortable and all on the same page. And I think that is, well, it's I think in response to the Me Too movement, but it is an interesting addition now to the dynamic between the singers and the director now. So I don't know how that's going to affect the director role. But again, I've been lucky, and I've had, some issues, but generally not what's on stage that hasn't been fixed. I've definitely gotten in like heated discussions and debates. But I've been lucky because I've been convinced by the directors that it's the right move, and I know that generally they know more than I do. So, but that's a long-winded way of saying no, sort of, but no.
What about you, Stephen? Do you feel you've an evolution with that, or?
Yeah, I haven't had the intimacy director yet in a show, but I do in my own personal rehearsal process. I always talk to the soprano or the mezzo, or even who knows, baritone, about what's appropriate. How do you feel about this? And I don't like rehearsing any scenes, like for instance, Romeo and Juliet. You have the whole bedroom scene, something like that. I don't like rehearsing unless there's more than you and the director in the room. There has to be like a panel of people, just because I know myself as a colleague, and I don't want to be seen any other way, and I just want other people to be there. And if someone's getting inappropriate, I want someone else to also see it and say, don't do that as well. Personally, I've had disagreements with directors when, as Nicole, you mentioned about shock value, when I feel like they're only doing things for shock value, and I don't agree with it. At the end of the day, is I have to go on stage and do it, and people are going to ask me that question: why did you choose to do that? It's not my choice. So if I'm not comfortable with something, I want my opinion to be heard. I sometimes feel that I have to speak up sometimes for younger colleagues that are being mistreated, that don't feel like they have the power behind them to do so. And I think that's important for us. I'm sure, Nicole, you felt the same way. I feel like it's important that if they just feel like they're not being heard, or they feel uncomfortable and no one's listening to them, someone has to step up and express it for them. And I've also had a conversation with the director where he kept telling me there was a scene where he wanted me to come out in my underwear. And I said, I honestly, personally don't feel comfortable about that. I said, had we talked about this a couple months ago, maybe it would be a different story. But personally, I don't feel at this moment comfortable enough to go on stage that way. And he kept insisting, well, don't worry about it. We'll see it on stage, and then we'll make a decision from there. I said, so you're going to wait until I'm on stage pretty much naked to decide whether or not you like it, even though I'm telling you right now, before it even happens, I don't feel comfortable at it. Oh, well, don't worry, we'll see it on stage. And I'm like, no, we're not going to see it on stage. I'm giving you enough time now to find a costume or a shirt option where I'm going to feel comfortable and you're still going to like it. We're not going to wait until the week of the show and then make the costume department scramble. Then we're going to have to make so-and-so scramble to get this, and the lighting people to scramble because maybe your shirt is reflecting of light. No. I'm giving you several weeks to tell you I don't feel comfortable about it. It's just not going to happen. And I feel like people should just listen more when you say things like that.
Yeah, I really hear both of you. So I did my directing training in Russia at a Russian theater institute. I'm not Russian, and Russian directors have a very particular set of like the way they're trained and the responsibility of interpretation and the way you work with artists as a director. And kind of my personal directing philosophy from that experience is like, my responsibility is to come to the rehearsal with like a spiritual jungle gym, and we all get in it and we play together. And like, we show each other games. It's like, you know more than I do as the director. I've like sat and thought about these things, but you have to sing it. You're on stage, you're like living it. So you tell me how it is, because I've never done it and I never will. Like, I'm never going to play Alfredo on the great stage. So tell me what needs to happen. And we can like figure it out together. And then eventually I leave the jungle gym and it's yours and you play the show, because that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's the great thing of the Russian theatrical tradition, is that there's this deep respect for each other and exchange that's supposed to happen. And so I'm hoping that, we're evolving in that direction in kind of the American opera tradition, that it kind of overlaps the same subject of like interpretation and like, please, let's not just do things for shock value because it's irresponsible, and respecting that audience members have needs and you don't know who's going to have reactions and it's going to be intense and etc. So we're very intellectual this afternoon, you guys.
Yeah, we have to move away from self-importance because opera is a team sport,
Yes.
You don't want a performance of just one great performance and a bunch of others. You want everyone to be at their optimal level all the time.
Yeah.
You'll get the best performance out of your artists if you are collaborative.
Yeah.
You'll get the most honest performance and they'll sing the best. So, in the end, that's what the audience wants.
Yeah, that's what we're coming for. That's what we want to hear. How about some like less intellectual questions? So I've always wondered, do you guys, when you're doing, these like long roles like Violetta, do you have snack backstage? And if so, like, what are you eating and drinking back there? Like to keep your energy up? Like, do you eat like brownies or are you like protein shakes kind of,
Nothing with nuts. Not allergic, but I made that mistake before. You're like, I have to clean my throat. Yeah, for a long roll, sure. I mean, I have a banana, just always a banana. And I'll make sure to have a big meal about 4 hours before I sing.
Oh,
I can't sing on a full stomach. And you have to have strength for the end. So yeah, intermission. Just the banana, the good old faithful. And there's a beta blocker in it. Doesn't hurt.
What about you, Steven?
I'm usually a banana guy, unless I'm like in a German city, in a German opera house where they have their cantina. And they have these pretzels that have like butter inside. And I know butter and milk is not good for you, but they're just so good. I find myself, if I have like 30 minutes before I go out, I'm like, I'm going to go downstairs and get a pretzel.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So I also just wanted to ask you guys like a secret, I like to ask singers these questions. Is there any role that you like pray you aren't offered? Like that you're like deep down, like, please don't ever make me sing this role?
Probably Violetta in La Traviata. I think Massenet Manon, because I know I could be really good at it except for the high D. So I don't want somebody to ask for me to do it and for me to have to turn down an amazing opportunity just because I struggle with those high Ds. Really, that's probably it.
How about you, Steven?
Maybe pre-COVID, but post-COVID, I would sing Parpignol right now if they were doing a production of Bohème somewhere. I don't know. I just... No, I don't. Honestly, I don't know. There are many. I mean, I try not to offer roles that I wouldn't enjoy singing because it's just not going to be fun for anybody around me at that point. But no, there are roles that like are dream roles, like that I know I'll never sing, that it kills me to listen to. Like, I fucking love, excuse me, sorry. I love the music of Verdi's Otello. I love the music of Otello. And I used to sing Costello, and I couldn't do it anymore because I love the music of Otello so much that I'm standing in the wings listening to it, knowing I'll never sing it. I'll never sing it. It's not going to happen. And like, you just sit there on the wings like, oh, isn't it so nice? It sounds so good. So good. Won't do it. So I was like, save myself the agony. Forget it.
It's such a great opera. Goodness.
It's a Tosca thing too. You know, it's the same thing with Tosca. Don't ever offer that to me because I could never in a million years sing it, but it's the dream role. I don't want to be that close.
Yep. I'll just ask one last little question. During this time of, shut down and being away from, our work and our colleagues, have you guys picked up any like exciting hobbies to keep yourself entertained? Anything fun to do safely at home or in a socially distanced kind of way?
I have several, but maybe I'll let Stephen go first.
Go ahead. No, Nicole, please go. I'm sure they're more interesting than mine, but go ahead.
Okay, I've hobbies. Well, we were discussing this earlier, actually. I've learned self-bartendering, where I just, I'm finally figuring out how to make cocktails. And so my favorite one that I've been spreading around the internet is called the written word. And I sound like a elite, silly person here, but, because it has expensive liqueurs and stuff, just look it up. The written word. It's like lime juice, chartreuse, gin, something else. Anyway, amazing. And I'm making lots and lots and lots and lots of different cocktails and building my my bar, which if you're not singing, you can drink a little bit more often. So that, and I'm learning how to drive tractors and zero-turn lawnmowers on my new my new property. Learning permaculture and all kinds of stuff because we got acreage now in Rochester.
Wow.
Big hobby. And
wow. So Nicole Cabell, you're out there driving a tractor.
Oh, I'm really good at it too.
Amazing. What about you, Stephen?
Wow. Well, I have been really doing nothing, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I've been studying and stuff, but hobbies, no. I started a show with a friend of mine who is also was a Marilla person, getting in W. We do a show every Monday. And so that we've been doing that. It's been fun. I've been learning about the COVID restrictions in every other country because, as in the opera business, they don't cancel everything immediately. It's like several, month by month they cancel it. So I'm always applying for visas just to get them canceled. But so I can tell you different countries, all the restrictions, what you can, what you can't do in case you're going. I can become your travel agent. Other than that, no. But funny thing is, this is not my story, but I'm just going to share it on here. On our show that we do every Monday, we had Susan Graham on. We were interviewing Susie. And we asked the same question. We said, do you have any hobbies that you do during COVID? Anything? She learned to play the accordion.
No, come on.
Absolutely. If you go to our show, you can see her play the accordion. She actually played it for us. But she picked up the accordion and played it.
That's cool.
Now that is time well used.
Right.
To learn a whole new instrument during this time is just incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're just about at time. We didn't get to quite all of the questions. Unfortunately, I'm just like now scrolling through them. I have such a nice time talking to both of you. I really hope to be able to work with both of you again very soon. We had such a lovely time putting together that Traviata, and your performance is not something to be missed. Like I said, that's why I had that question at the beginning. Your chemistry in the performance is so great. And the way you guys sing together is just absolutely glorious. So I'm looking forward to revisiting the performance this weekend. And I know our audience of the San Francisco Opera is as well.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to both of you again, hopefully in the near future.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Good seeing you guys again. I mean, it just feels like it's been ages,
Yeah.
I know. We'll be together again. We will. I believe it. So here's to that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And with that, Kathryn, we'll send it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please tune in this weekend at sfopera.com starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow to watch this beautiful production of La Traviata. Have a great weekend, all. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Nicole and Stephen.